George R.R. Martin, thanks for joining us here on Sky News. Welcome to Edinburgh.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
You could have had any number of Sky employees sitting in this seat, such as the popularity of your work with those of us at Sky News. I mean, have you been surprised in any sense by the popularity of your books, of the series that flow from it? I mean, it's fantasy literature at its core.
Well, I've always thought that there was a huge market waiting on television and film for epic fantasy. Epic fantasy, since Tolkien broke through in the 1960s, has been gigantic in the field of books. One author after another has hit the bestseller list at #1. I'm only the latest in a long tradition of that, but it's never translated to television or film until first Peter Jackson did it in film with the Lord of the Rings series, and now in television with Game of Thrones. And I think it's because there was this perception in television that fantasy was for kids. And the few people who attempted fantasy always slotted it at like the 8 o'clock slot, and no sex, no violence, don't want to disturb the kiddies. But fantasy in book form, epic fantasy in book form, is very much an adult genre. And Game of Thrones is the first thing to really deliver that. And, the audience was there, as I thought it would be. But that being said, the sheer scale of popularity has astonished me. I mean, I never expected that we would be the most successful, highest-rated show on HBO, not with landmark series like The Sopranos and Deadwood and Rome having gone before us. I never suspected that this would be such a global phenomenon, that the show would be popular all around the world in cultures very, very different from the ones I was drawing on and when I wrote these books.
With that kind of popularity, though, there can occasionally come a degree of pressure to produce. For example, you're here in Edinburgh for the book festival, but a quick trawl through social media and you will discover that many of your fans would rather that you were at home writing. I mean, do you find that frustrating to an extent?
Yeah, I do. But first of all, for every fan like that, there are hundreds who write me letters saying, hey, take your time, we'll be there whenever you're finished, live your life. And, it's a consequence of the nature of social media that you get this kind of stuff. There's nothing can be done about it, but it does get a little irritating at times. I mean, none of it's new. It happens whenever I do anything, basically, when I watch a football game on television or, when I go to visit my family in New Jersey, and no matter what I do, there'll be people on social media saying he should be home writing.
I mean, certainly there's a huge amount of speculation as to how the series might end. I mean, do you trawl these websites just keeping an eye on whether or not that your best-kept secrets have made their way into the public domain? I mean, would you change your plot lines if you discovered them someone somewhere had guessed as to your conclusion?
I would not. The series, the book series, first started hitting the bestseller lists in the late 90s. And that was the time when the first websites started being formed. And at that time, I did look at some of the websites and read the discussions going on and the people talking about theories and putting forward guesses as to where books was going and what some of the secrets that I was hinting at were. And many of the theories were completely off base and wrong, but some people got it right. And that's when I really wrestled with the issue in like 1999 and 2000, 2001. Okay, these people have figured out something. Should I now change it? And I decided that way lay disaster. I'd laid in clues and things that pointed to a particular thing. And if I now changed it because one person in 1,000 had figured it out, the new solution would not be satisfactory because the clues point in another way. It would be a cheat in a sense, So for that reason and for other reasons, I really stopped looking at the websites. I don't want to know what they figured out and what they haven't figured out. Let them have the discussions and debates among themselves. I'm very gratified that so much discussion is taking place, but I'm not going to let that influence how I write the books. I'm going to write the books the way I always planned to write the books and let the chips fall where they may.
You've been praised. Well, you've been praised for a number of things within the books, but in particular for the way in which you've used female characters. That they've been strong, that they've been independent, they've been as conniving as the men. I mean, would you describe this series as feminist in its content?
I certainly believe that you should have strong female characters. I'm fortunate in that I have a large canvas. I have many characters, so I can portray many different women who are as different from each other as they are from the men. I can have courageous women and cowardly women, and strong women and weak women, and evil women and good women, and so forth. And that's the way I think it should be. There were times in my life that I was identified as a feminist and would have described myself as that. The feminist movement has changed over the years, and there's some debate whether a male can ever truly be a feminist, so I hesitate to use that term anymore because I don't want to give offense to those women who feel that no male can truly be feminist, and I am indubitably male. But I certainly believe in portraying women as human beings and as strong and vital characters in my fiction, and I like that in fiction by other people when I read books by other writers.
Certainly a lot of the scenes in which they are involved are quite heavily sexualised. There was one particular scene which caused a degree of controversy, a rape scene, which some had suggested, some had accused the series makers, the Game of Thrones series makers, of normalising rape. Does it concern you when you see your source material receiving that kind of reception?
Well, I mean, no one likes to be criticized. I know the particular controversy you're referring to, which is a scene that played out somewhat differently on screen than it does in the books. Obviously, as the author of the books, I like the way I did it. If they had included, I think, some of the way that scene played out in the books, it might not have been quite so controversial. Hopefully, it still would have been somewhat controversial. I mean, it was never meant to be a feel-good scene, even though I think it's a consensual scene in the books, but it's still a disturbing scene. It's a scene of incest that takes place in the sept where the son, the dead son of the two principals, is lying in state prior to his funeral. It's always going to be disturbing and twisted and problematic, and should be controversial. You know, I want people to debate some of these issues and to talk about it, but hopefully from the perspective as I tried to get at it in the books.
You clearly spend quite a lot of your time in historical research. I see the War of the Roses in the material.
Sure.
I'm fairly certain I see the Scottish Wars of Independence in there at some points as well.
And the Glencoe Massacre and the Black Dinner, you know, all of that stuff is in there, at least as inspiration.
Is there much of the modern world in there? I say so because so much of what is happening on screen and in the books is to deal with politics rather than the punch-ups of history.
Not consciously. I mean, I'm not writing conscious allegory to any situation in the modern world, but there are certain universals when we're talking about war, when we're talking about power, when we're talking about the appropriate and inappropriate uses of violence. That stuff is as relevant in 2014 as it was in 1350. So, yeah, there are lessons there for modern men.
I mean, I have to ask, when will we see the new book? My colleagues will shoot me if I don't ask, so when won't we see it?
When it's done.